Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the second press conference for the June Assembly of the U.S. Bishops. My name is Chieko Noguchi, and I'm the Director of Public Affairs for the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. The host of our press conference is Bishop Michael Burbidge of the Diocese of Arlington. Bishop Burbidge is the chairman of the USCCB's Committee on Communications, and His Excellency is joining us from his chancery in Arlington. Bishop Burbidge, we're so grateful for your leadership for the Committee on Communications, and I'd like to hand it over to you for introduction of our panelists.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you for hanging in there. Our meeting went a little bit longer than anticipated today, so thank you for hanging around and engaging us in conversation this afternoon. It's been a very full afternoon of discussions on 9 action items on the agenda. We heard from the National Review Board Chair on our ongoing commitment and work in the area of protecting child and young people from abuse, as well as votes to approve causes for canonizations for 2 contemporary individuals. We had Archbishop Leonard Blair of Hartford, who is going to join us to answer questions about the liturgical translations that the bishops voted on today. But because the discussion ran so long this afternoon, he was unable to join us for this press conference due to a previous commitment on his schedule. I am joined by Bishop Kevin Rhodes once again, as he was here yesterday with us, of the Diocese of Fort Wayne, South Bend's chairman of the USCCB's Committee on Doctrine. Bishop Rhodes was with us yesterday and returns today. Thank you, Bishop Rhodes, for doing that. This afternoon, much of our discussion, the last section of our meeting was extensive. So all bishops who wanted to speak could be heard on the topic of the potential drafting of a document on the Eucharist. And we will not know the results of that vote until tomorrow morning. The votes are being done electronically tonight. Bishops have until 7 p.m. So we will get the votes tomorrow morning in our session at the beginning of our session. And if drafting the document on the Eucharist does move forward, as I mentioned yesterday, Bishop Rhodes' committee will do so. As you observed, perhaps from the live stream, the intensity and passion expressed in the individual interventions clearly show, I think, a few things. How deeply each bishop loves the Eucharist. I mean, that was a central theme. People had different opinions, different approaches to what we should do with this letter, but their love for the Eucharist was certainly evident across the board, as well as our desire to be united as a church, as a body of bishops, even though we have different ideas and different approaches to the subject. That desire for unity was so clearly there. I can't imagine. I mean, I'm so proud to be part of a conference like this, where you can have over 300 people debating, sharing different ideas, somewhat significantly disagreeing, but with transparency, with total respect. Every time a bishop began, he thanked the bishop who did the work. And so, you know, I'm very proud to be part of a conference of bishops that shows such respect for one another, even though we know there's disagreement and that desire to find a path to even stronger unity within our conference and in our church. And so we listened to each other respectfully. And now each bishop, having heard from other bishops, will be in a position to cast his vote, and that, as I said, will be given to us tomorrow. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'll hand this back to Chieko, who will coordinate the asking of the questions and the responses.
Okay. Thank you, Your Excellency. We'll open up the floor to questions from members of the media. We had about 40 journalists who had registered to participate. I think because we ran long, there's been some drop off in terms of numbers, and I know that there are lots of questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can in the limited time we have. To ask a question, I would ask that you use the private chat feature on your screen and indicate to us that you would like to ask a question. And when you're called on, please unmute yourself and ask your question. And please also make sure that the volume level on your microphone is turned up on your device. The first question goes to Elizabeth Dias with the New York Times.
Hi, everyone, and bishops, thank you so much for your time. It's great to see everyone, even virtually, since we haven't all been able to meet. This question is for Bishop Rhodes. We've all heard a lot of debate today, and I was hoping you could just clear one thing up for us. Should President Joe Biden be allowed to receive communion from the Catholic Church? And then I have a follow-up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was waiting for the follow-up. Okay. Yeah, I can't answer that question. We will be looking at that whole issue of Eucharistic consistency. And the way the church's law is, that is for his own bishop. There is when you look at canon law, that's a decision of his bishop. That is not the task of our committee to look at individuals.
Okay, thank you. And there's something quite symbolic about this, at least from my perspective covering the country. President Biden is clearly the most observant president in almost 50 years since Jimmy Carter. He goes to Mass regularly. And it seems that he's just not observant in ways that work for some of the conference. And so I also talk to a lot of young people, and I'm wondering, what does this mean what would this mean? I mean, this is clearly, there's a political message here. It's undeniable. People have openly said that today. So what does that mean for a generation of Catholics who say a church that has no place for President Joe Biden has no place for me? I mean, are you happy with a smaller, purer church?
If could I respond, Elizabeth, first?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for asking the question. Again, we would never say as a Catholic Church, we do not have a place for any person. We are always, as a church, an imitation of Christ, a church that opens arms wide and lead, God willing, to the loving and merciful embrace of God. So we never, ever cut off a person from the church. As teachers, we teach the truth in love. And that's our role as pastors. And we discussed that today. We were renewed in that role today, that we are pastors and we are teachers. And it's because we love and it's because we serve. We have to find the best way to communicate the truth with conviction and with compassion, and to make it inviting, an inviting path to follow. And again, I think Bishop Rhodes made a good point today. It would not be prudent at this press conference to talk about any individual, because that's not what this document is about. This document is about what we believe about the Eucharist, how to live a Eucharistic life, and to go forth in service. So no, we do not cut off any person from the church. That's not who we are. We embrace people in love and mercy. Bishop Rhodes.
Bishop Burbidge, you said it well. I agree with everything you just said. So I think that answers the question.
Thank you.
The next question goes to Michael Laughlin from America Magazine.
Hi, thanks for taking my question, and thanks for making time after a long afternoon. We heard one bishop say that he felt that the process of crafting a document was being rushed, and he couldn't help but think it was because of the midterm and the next presidential election. And I'm just curious what your response to that would be. Is there a political consideration here, and how would you hope that this document affects the next two elections?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think it's being rushed. I think this is kind of a typical length of time for a pastoral statement. This isn't a pastoral letter where there's, like years ago when they did the pastoral letter on the economy or the pastoral letter on War and Peace. This is a pastoral statement, which is going to be a teaching document. But to me, we have sufficient time. We've been talking about this for months. We've had a number of meetings of the Doctrine Committee. As I said at the meeting today, we're open to input from the regions where bishops will meet in regional groups. We'll also have time in September, the other committees that will look over our draft, they can provide their input. So I think there is sufficient time before November. It never really crossed my mind, the politics of it, as far as the timing. That to me, just whoever, I think you said there was a comment about that today, about timing.
Yeah, the Bishop of Lubbock said that he couldn't help but think that the process was being rushed in order to, ahead of the 2022 and 2024 elections. No,
that never entered my mind or the committees.
Yeah, Michael, I recall that. I recall that comment also, and I think I agree with Bishop Rhodes. There's the motivation. What's motivating us as bishops, as teachers, is the Eucharist, and and cited throughout our discussions today were the grave concerns about the lack of belief in real presence, the lack of people going to church. How are we going to get people back to church and that love for Eucharist when it's been mostly virtual for so long? And we are deeply motivated about lifting up the precious gift of the Eucharist as a source and summit of our lives. And for anyone, I feel extremely confident in saying those in favor of moving this letter forward, it's not a political motivation. It's motivating us is what the heart of our teaching and faith is. It's on the Eucharist. And I agree with Bishop Rhodes. There's plenty of time, and the conference has a process for us to allow for dialogue and further input and amendments. Now, some good suggestions were given today, and Bishop Rhodes and on behalf of his committee said, we're open to that too. Here's another way we might be able to dialogue. Maybe add some regional meetings where bishops can get together and talk in smaller groups. If the process can be improved, but let's get something in front of us to be able to dialogue about. And that's what this vote is all about. Can we just give the Doctrine Committee something for us to have in front of us, which is already in an outline form?
The next question goes to Ed Condon with The Pillar.
Thank you. This is a question for Bishop Rhodes. You mentioned the possibility and the suggestion by a number of bishops in favor of regional meetings or provincial meetings, and also being in favor of continuing with the drafting of this document. Is there the logistical scope for the bishops to sort of eat their cake and have it too between now and November? That is, can the drafting committee carry on with its work if it's approved in the vote? And is there still scope for regional meetings in advance of the November assembly?
Ed, that's a good question. I was thinking about that. I think what we can get started on very easily is part one and part two, because I didn't sense that there was any issues there. I think the disagreements are in part three. And so I think we can get started soon, right away, on parts 1 and 2. Part 3, I think it would be helpful if we can get more input from, we have other documents and other things we could start working on part 3, but before we would actually finish a draft, I would want to have that input from the regions. And I think the General Secretariat, I hope that they'll be able to have regional meetings during the summer so that, we can receive those results in due time by September, hopefully, so that we can finish the draft of the document so that we can send it to those other committees for their review. So it is a bit of a tight timeline, but I think it is possible.
I think it is too, because even in this year of the pandemic, one of the positive elements was bishops as regions felt the need to be communicating more frequently and getting together, setting that time aside, because there were so many issues to discuss and to benefit from each other and hear from each other. So we're kind of in the custom almost of this past year of having additional regional meetings, more so than we've ever done. So I think it's you know, it's going to take effort and commitment, but it's certainly possible to do both. Thanks, Ed.
The next question goes to Jack Jenkins with Religion News Service.
Hi, thank you again for taking my question. I have one question and then a unrelated follow-up that is actually not about the Eucharist. But the first one is just, you know, to kind of piggyback on some questions that have already been asked. You know, there's been this discussion that this document is not about one person or about just politicians, that it is broader than that. But anyone who watched the proceedings today, you know, Joe Biden's name came up several times and the media didn't ask those questions. Those were your brother bishops bringing it up. And while it sounded like this document could reference not just abortion, but also, say, white supremacy or you know, other issues, you know, there was one other proposal a few years ago in 2018 when a bishop proposed canonical penalties for people who for Catholics who participated in the family separation policy along the U.S.-Mexico border, and there was nothing like this. There wasn't this movement for a document. So I'm curious, you know, are you concerned that even if this document isn't about just Joe Biden or it isn't about politicians and it's not just about abortion, that inevitably it will be perceived that way, and that, you know, that the church could be put in the middle of this political logjam that several bishops get brought up. So basically, are you concerned about that this will be seen as a partisan effort?
That's a good question. I think the way we write Part 3 and the way we talk about Eucharistic consistency, I think the text itself hopefully will broaden this a bit so that they see, no, this applies to all Catholics. Yes, there is a special obligation of those who are in leadership because of their public visibility. But at the same time, you know, and I said that in the answers to the questions today, it really is for all of us. I mean, Eucharistic consistency means that we really do examine ourselves, that we strive to live Eucharistic lives, which means we strive to live in communion with the teachings of the church and all of that. I can't, you know, so I just hope that by the way we write it, that it will broaden people's understanding, and that it won't just focus on the president or any particular issue.
And
those issues are important. I don't want to minimize those, but I don't want it to just be that. Yeah,
I agree. I mean, just looking at, you know, just seeing the outline and what is proposed, and especially the first two chapters are going to be very rich in theology, in our faith, and in what we believe and who we are. I mean, so, you know, I really do think I agree with Bishop Rhodes that once the document is seen, it's like, yeah, this is much more comprehensive than, you know, against one person or one group of people or anything like that. But, you know, we keep saying that, and again, that the question keeps being asked. So, you know, so we can't get tired of repeating, you know, what this document, the source, the reasons for this document and its content.
Got it. And my quick follow-up is just that, you know, we're coming out of the pandemic right now. And while, you know, to invoke Joe Biden again, he's launched this vaccination effort before July 4th. And I know the USCCB does partner with the federal government on things like refugee resettlement. And I'm curious, either the USCCB itself or bishops in general, is there either already in motion efforts to kind of participate in that vaccination effort, either, yes, partnering with the federal government, or it's just part of a broader vaccination push? I'm just curious if the USCCB or the bishops in general are, you know, actively a part that push to vaccinate the country before July 4th?
Well, I know that throughout this process, the Catholic Church has certainly keeping the health and priority well-being of all the faithful in mind. And I know in dioceses throughout the country, there have been locations where the vaccine was made available, where people were welcome to participate on site. So I don't know of any formal agreement between the conference and this initiative, but certainly the compassion to keep all people healthy and safe, and try to get the vaccine to as many people who are looking to receive it. Bishop Rhodes?
No, I agree. I think it's mostly happening on the local level.
Yeah.
Like Bishop Burbidge said, I can speak here in my own diocese, parishes, schools, et cetera, for example, that are vaccination sites. I'm not aware of anything on the level of the national conference. I don't know.
Thanks, Jack.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next question goes to Dennis Sadowski with Catholic News Service.
Hello. Thanks for taking me to ask a question. I am wondering, the process seemed to evolve over time of developing this letter, Bishop Rhodes. So that way, in the past seemed to change kind of quickly when Cardinal Ladaria's letter came through in May. I'm just wondering, how influential is that? Is that the perception that's out there that you're trying to combat and overcome, even among some of your fellow bishops?
That's a good question. I think the plan has evolved, because when Archbishop Gomez first asked me if the doctrine committee would do a document, a draft document on Eucharistic consistency, he also had in mind something broader, in the sense of placing it within the context of the strategic plan of the U.S. bishops that's focused on the Eucharist, as well as the Eucharistic revival. So, and then that's also what the doctrine committee, we recommended the same thing. But we still use that language of national policy until we got the letter from Cardinal Ladaria. And I think we took that out because even though our intent wasn't to issue national norms, that term national policy kind of led people to think we were talking about legislative approach. So it just seemed best to take that out altogether, because, we weren't, our plan wasn't to go in that direction. So we took that out, and we're just going to be looking at the theological and doctrinal part, which would be foundational for the church's discipline. And I think that's still important, and that's still going to be in there. So I hope that answers your question. It did evolve, but it was broader than a national policy from the beginning. The national policy was just part of that.
And yeah, one real quick follow-up on that, because of the strategic plan that was adopted in November, was there any talk by the doctrine committee of having this kind of document before the strategic plan was put forth? Was it because of the election of a Catholic president that it really took on a new momentum?
It was not, this began, I can only speak for the doctrine committee. It only came to us when Archbishop Gomez asked us. So it didn't originate with us. We were not planning anything until he asked us.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next question goes to Ann Thompson with NBC News.
Thank you, Chico. Hi, Bishop Rhodes. This question is for you, and it's simply this. With this document, aren't you running the risk of turning the Eucharist into a political football?
No. I think that the politicizing of this is coming from elsewhere. you know, I think our whole point here is really, it's not new. I mean, the whole idea of Eucharistic consistency is something that's been taught by bishops and Pope Benedict XVI, the Latin American bishops. It's something that's a very beautiful concept, that we are to live what we receive. I always think of Mother Teresa and the connection between Eucharist and life. It was the Eucharist that motivated her to go out to the poor and to serve the dying. And I think it's integral to our faith in the Eucharist that this is a mystery to be lived. It should impact our life, that we bear witness to Christ. So that's what it's about. Now, what are the political repercussions of that? You know, well, we're all supposed to be living a moral life and be living the gospel. That's what Eucharistic consistency is about.
And yet Pope Francis says that communion is not a reward for saints, but the bread of sinners.
Right.
So doesn't that mean everyone can come to the communion rail? We're all sinners in some way, shape, or form.
No, that is not the teaching of the Catholic Church. Those in the state of mortal sin are not allowed to go to Holy unless they've repented and gone to confession first. That's defined Catholic doctrine. That's not, and Pope Francis, I'm sure, you know, Pope Francis holds that.
So is voting.
That's in the Catechism of the Catholic Church.
But I understand that. But if voting for for abortion services, is that a mortal sin? Does that put you in a state of mortal sin?
That whole issue, I mean, we're not getting into the whole, we've already taught on that issue in faithful citizenship. So all that's kind of taking us away from what our focus here is. The document Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizen talks about the responsibilities of Catholics when it comes to voting. That's kind of, I think, a separate issue from what we're talking about when we're talking about the Eucharist. So we're not getting into, you know, we're not getting into the voting and its relationship to the Eucharist. That's not what we're doing.
But isn't that why Archbishop Naumann today said that because President Biden has the most pro-abortion agenda in history, that's why this needs to happen?
I would have to let Archbishop Naumann, I don't want to speak for him. I feel uncomfortable speaking for him, what he meant by that.
Okay, let's take, I regret that we're actually running up against time. The last question goes to Christopher White with National Catholic Reporter.
Thank you. A question for Bishop Rhodes. Some of those speaking out today against the communion document are some of the bishops that are perceived to be closest to Pope Francis, you know, cardinals who are by definition principal collaborators with the Pope. So I'm just curious how you would respond to the charge by some that by moving ahead with the document, it sort of evidences a bishop's conference out of sync with the Pope and his own desires on the matter.
You know, I love Pope Francis. I don't see anything that we're doing that would be inconsistent with the teaching of Pope Francis. As a matter of fact, I would like to include some of his teaching in the document.
Yeah, that's, if I could add to that too, that's a little unsettling to hear that comment, that, you know, whatever statement and the teachings within this document, with whatever the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops does, is consistent with our Catholic faith and always in union, you know, with our Holy Father. And that's why we often use his quotes. And if you look at the outline that's being proposed, it's very, very reflective of who Pope Francis is and what he says. He talks about, you know, the awe and wonder we should have to the Eucharist. Yes, he talks about, correct, that none of us are worthy to receive the Eucharist. In a sense, it's a precious gift, but we do put ourselves in the disposition of receiving it worthily. And he often quotes, Pope Francis quotes Jesus, you know, when he would forgive and would heal sinners. Well, the Lord himself would say, then go and sin no more. You have to repent. And so the bishops who, whether you're voting for this document to come forward or not to go forward, to simplify and say, well, that's the Pope, those are Pope, or, you know, in closer collaboration, Pope Francis, that's not a reality. The bishops here today spoke consistently on either side of their union with the Holy Father, and often on both sides, you know, use Francis's own words. And so that's something that I really would like to reaffirm, that this position has nothing to do with your on one side of collaboration, the Holy Father, the other side. No, we're all here in union with the Holy Father, and certainly being consistent with what he's preaching as he shepherds the universal church.
I even think that third part is so much Pope Francis.
Yes.
The Eucharist, a mystery to be lived. I mean, Catholic teaching is the Eucharist educates us to love. The Eucharist commits us to the poor. The Eucharist commits us to defend the life and the dignity of the unborn, of the migrant, of the sick, of the dying. I mean, there's an intimate connection between the Eucharist and our mission to love. And that's, I think, what Pope Francis is all about.
You know, every bishop makes that pledge, that promise when he's ordained a bishop, pledges that loyalty and the faithfulness to the Holy Father. And, you know, and we saw that play out throughout these past couple of days too, across the board, even though we have different opinions and different ways we may implement our pastoral skills or decisions.
I'm so sorry we're not able to get to all the questions today. Bishop Burbidge, would you like to offer any concluding remarks as we wrap up?
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you again, everyone, for your presence here this afternoon. Thank you, Chieko, for leading our discussions in this format. And thank you, everyone, for your time. We're most grateful.
Okay. Thank you, Your Excellencies, for your time this afternoon. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the press, for your participation in this press briefing. Please go to the website tomorrow at 1:00 p.m. Eastern Time for the live stream of Day 3 of the Bishops' Assembly. If members of the media have any additional questions, as always, please reach out to the Public Affairs Office for any assistance, and my team will be happy to assist you. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.